Okay, students, welcome back to EHour. Happy Friday to you. Last week, Uma's here talking to us all about EHour, talking to us about her career, talking to us a little bit about the factors you see highlighted. Today, we build upon that and we continue our education on all things entrepreneurial mindset and successful factors. I could not imagine somebody who is better poised to speak to anybody out there and show me your hands, throw them up if you feel like you're in a position where you're like, I'm really curious about entrepreneurship. I feel like this could be me. I feel like I could be a founder, but I don't know. I don't know if that's me. I don't know if I'm cut out for it. I don't know if I'm there. Yeah? Is that you? Maybe? Sorry, it's okay. Yeah. Okay. This is somebody who I think can really help you understand that that's all right. It is okay to feel unsure about whether or not this is cut out for you and know whether or not you have what it takes for it. Why? He's an innovator. He's a founder. He's a CEO. He's a hell of a team leader. He's a 3-time College of Engineering alum. He got his BS in electrical engineering, another degree in electrical engineering, and then 2 in biomedical engineering. He developed an electrocardiogram on a Game Boy for his master's thesis. Not bad. He's got the biggest video game collection of probably anyone I've ever heard or known. But here's what you got to know about him. But you got to know first the context. The vast majority of startups, what do? What happens within the first couple of years? Most succeed or most fail? Fail. Okay, we got that. Absolutely. Most fail. You know what? He's only ever worked for one company since he graduated 24 years ago, the one that he founded. Think about how astronomically rare that is, okay? While working for that company and running that company and growing that team, he's worked with the likes of the Secret Service, the Army, Ford Motor Company, and many more of the biggest projects that you probably have never heard of. I'm hoping he's going to reveal some of those stories to us today. Please give me a warm welcome to my friend, Mitch Rohde.
Wow. Oh, look, clicker. Awesome. See if I'm smart enough to use it. Awesome. Well, with that kind of introduction, man, I'm more the comic relief here today. I really appreciate the invitation. This is an honor and a privilege. I actually looked at the write-up on LinkedIn earlier this week, and I was like, wow, this guy looks super impressive. And I copied and pasted the link, and I sent it to my mother. At first, I sent it to my kids. They're like, wow, Dad, that's pretty cool. And then I sent it to my wife, and she's like, wow, that's really cool. Then I sent it to my mother. My mother texted me back, LOL, did you write that yourself? I'm like, you can't, thanks, Mom. It's like, you can't make that stuff up. Well, like I said, it's a privilege to be here and an honor. It's great to see you guys. This is a beautiful facility, as I was saying earlier. My name's Mitch. I have been associated with the University of Michigan since 1990. I spent the entire 90s here at the university, so everything looks a lot different than it did back then, but it still feels very much the same. This is a wonderful place, and I can tell you, we didn't have this kind of support in terms of being an entrepreneur back when I was a student. There was, in fact, I think one class, and it was taught like every other semester. So seeing something like this and having the Center for Entrepreneurship is just unbelievable, just amazing. So today I want to talk about, let's see if I can do this. There you go, that's me. So cool. So I'm an electrical engineering and a biomedical engineering alum from here. And I have indeed been working at Quantum Signal since I founded it when I came out of grad school. I want to tell you a little bit about my journey here today in Quantum, which is effectively Quantum's journey, and hopefully you'll glean something from it, and then we can do some Q&A and some fireside chat and all that good stuff. Back in the late 90s, I was a student working on actually neural implants for direct brain interfaces here, and it was a lot of signal and image processing, and if you guys, someone has heard of signal and image processing here, it's algorithm development to try to get useful information out of noisy signals. And so we were doing algorithms on brain signals as well as other things. I didn't know what I really wanted to do with my life. It just seemed like I wanted to work on cool stuff with smart people and make a difference. And so when I thought about where I was going to go after grad school, I thought, it would be fun to start a business where we could do fun stuff and kind of control what we were working on and who we were working with and these sorts of things and truly make that difference. And so I got together with another grad student and a professor, a guy named Bill Williams that was here, and we talked about what we could do. And it so happened that, hey, we were signal and image processing geeks that like to develop algorithms. And boy, there aren't a lot of people out there talking about what you can do with algorithms and applied to different things. I mean, there were places, right? There's like communications use a lot of algorithms. Consumer electronics used, obviously encoding and decoding algorithms. But you would go out into a lot of places and you talk about algorithms and people would just be like, huh? And that was a real opportunity, we thought, to take the things that we were doing in academics and move them out of the ivory tower into real world applications. We would be consultants, signal processing consultants. And that sounded pretty sexy and like a pretty huge opportunity. You have to understand, back in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, Microsoft was not putting on commercials about AI. You were not hearing about algorithms and AI everywhere. That was not a thing. In fact, you would go in to sell this product or sell our company in various places, and people would just be like, I don't know what you're talking about, bro. So I say here, timing is almost everything. And indeed, like a lot of projects that I've worked on over time, sometimes it's a little early, sometimes it's a lot early. But in the case of quantum signal and what we were planning to do, it turned out we were probably about 15 years early, which is pretty amazing. So when I think about the opportunity and I think about, how we started to go, I mean, I got a few different customers. I walked around and I made a lot of contacts. And I went to a lot of meetings and I had these little slide decks. And guys, if you saw my initial slide decks, they were sad. They were like, hey, here's some big algorithms. I'd have like 6 slides of equations and then a graph. Be like, any questions? And one of our initial customers said, wow, I haven't felt like that since college, which is not what you want to hear from a customer that you're trying to land. We went through a lot of meetings for the first 2 years. And those meetings, some had opportunities, most of them didn't have very good opportunities, but we had a customer that was in biometrics and we were doing some face and speech algorithms. And that was a pretty fun project all the way up until the point where the biometrics customer closed up shop and owed us a lot of money. And that is not a very comfortable position to be in after being in business 2 years and not getting many paychecks and sticking it out. And you're like, hey, we're going to get paid. And then you don't get paid. So after that biometrics customer disappeared, we were still like, well, maybe we could do things with biometrics. Maybe this is something we could focus in on. You guys know like face recognition and speaker verification, these sorts of things. So we happened to be, this is around 9/11, we happened to be going to a conference on biometrics to see if we could get anyone interested in what we were doing. So we went to the conference, we showed our ideas, just figured maybe we would catch a customer or something like that. We ran into a government person from NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And she told us, she said, wow, you guys seem pretty smart. You got some cool stuff. Do you have any customers? And we're like, It's like, well, you have good algorithms. Well, we're working on them. She said, well, you should apply to the ATP program because that's a place that funds high-risk, high-reward technologies. And clearly, post 9/11, we need more biometrics. So we applied to the ATP program. This is 2002. It was funny. We went past the first round. We got to the second round of the program. And I had and this is where I wanted to underscore this so you guys know what this looks like in terms of entrepreneurship. A person that I really respected, that was actually a high-level person here at the university, came out to her office to meet with us. And she said to me, why are you applying to that program? You have no chance. And I'm like, why do I have no chance? Well, that only goes to big companies. Only big companies are going to get those awards. Like, okay. And at that point, I had been into it for quantum for 2 years and we were struggling. And really, you had nowhere to go but up. And so you really had to, I believed in myself. I believed in my partners. And so we kept going on that project, on that application. And we applied and we got all the way to the 4th round and went to DC. And this was a very big deal back in the day. Got all the way to the 4th round, went to DC. There's a whole table of 16 or 20 people, all senior engineers from NIST, very much like a dissertation defense. And we got up and we gave our presentation and they asked us a bunch of questions. At some point, the lead guy looks across from the end of the table, looks at us, and it's myself and 3 of my partners in crime. And he looks at us and he says, so we have 650 applications. Why should we give the money to you? And I looked over at my partners, who are much older than me and more experienced, and they kind of all looked back at me. And I knew this was like, how like there are times in your life when it's your moment? I knew this was my moment. It was the moment that I had to speak up because I was the face of the company. And I just looked at him. I said, I built a team here, a very, very small team. We've got some algorithms, some ideas. We've been struggling for a couple of years. We could go forward. This could have great impact for algorithms work well. But, how are you ever going to make an impact if no one ever gives you a chance? And, and I kind of put it all on the table there, right? It was the moment. And I'm sure my voice cracked, and I have a hard time saying that line today without my voice cracking. But they said, they kind of smiled. They said, well, thank you very much, Dr. Rohde. And they escorted us out. And we drove back because we couldn't afford plane tickets. We drove back from DC, and we wondered, are we going to get this grant? And sure enough, we did. And it was $1.8 million or 1.85. And we went forward with the project, and that helped us launch the company and hire about 8-9 people and become a team, and not just guys in the side, doing things in a basement. About a year into that project, developing the algorithms, the project manager, I had to ask her, I said, so, was it really tough for you guys to decide on us? Were we threshold or whatever? And she's like, oh no. She's like, when you walked into that room, you were ranked number 1 out of 650 proposals. So it was yours to lose. Only if you said something really bad would you have lost that grant. And so, that was a moment in my career that I will never forget, and a moment that I am really, really proud of. That's when we really launched as Quantum. Following the end of that grant, the whole idea was, hey, we'll take this grant, we'll build biometrics technology, there'll be great algorithms, we'll have customers, it'll be fantastic. Well, you go 2 years into the grant, 2.5 years into the grant, you got a few customers on the side. It doesn't really work out. Like, biometrics is not working out for us. The algorithms are meh, they perform like this, but the performance requirements like this, and the whole industry is tanking because vendors have sold technologies and products that don't live up to spec. And so we decided that at the end of this grant, we really needed to get out of biometrics and get into other things. And so in about 2005, I hustled and I thought about, what are we going to do in terms of this company? What do we want to be? Are we going to still be signal and image processing consulting? Are we going to be something different? Are we going to be biometrics still then? It's like, no, we need to stay true to our roots in terms of algorithms and signal processing, but we need to listen to customers. And I think on our first round before the biometrics thing, we listened to customers and their needs, but we didn't listen closely enough. And so in this period, about 2005 through 2010, I went out and I listened very, very closely to various customers in the Army and in commercial spaces and Sony and these sorts of things. And we experimented with what our offerings were: software, hardware, algorithms, modeling and simulation. I built up a gaming team that we could use for games as well as modeling and simulation applications. And so we built it, we cobbled it all together from an array of customers and projects, and we built a team that was very multifunctional with a lot of offerings. And so while we stayed true to our roots, we experimented and we innovated, not just in technology, but in what we did as a company. And that is what got us through and built us up. And pretty soon, we were building products, we had all sorts of services, we had all sorts of customers, we had a real company. And it went from begging for a $20,000 check for a project that we were going to do way too much work on, to having customers call you up and say, hey, I've got a $500,000 check I want to send you right now. We don't know what we're going to do with you. We just want to reserve some of your time for next year. And so that was a big change. One of the big things that we started to focus on was mobile robotics, mainly because I'm a super big robot geek, and I've been building robots since I was a kid. And so we started to get into robots with the Army and some other folks, and that became a much bigger deal. Before I sit down and we answer some questions, one of the things I want to talk about is culture. One of the biggest things that drove our success at Quantum is culture. And I think none of you in the room that are going to form a company or go to a company should ever underestimate the impact of culture, the importance of culture. I founded Quantum in large part because, like I said earlier, I wanted to work with smart people on cool projects that made a difference. And I really didn't want to have to dress up. That was the other part. I didn't want to wear suits every day. I want to wear t-shirts and shorts. You got to think about where you want to work and what the culture is going to be like. Is it going to value ideas and creativity? Is it going to be something where there's a lot of politics and structure? And I'm not a really big politics and structure guy. I don't know if you can tell by listening to the way I speak, but I like it loose, and I like to build cool stuff, and I like to solve problems. So in 2010, in building that culture and sending the right message, we were looking around for headquarters, and that headquarters that stumbled upon us, we saw a lot of like cube farms and kind of plain buildings. And before this, we were in a very plain building, but we stumbled on a high school in Saline, Michigan called Union School that the schools weren't going to use anymore. And so we bought Union School from the Saline area schools that had been in service as a school from 1930 to 2010, and we converted it into our headquarters. And that's where we are today. And the reason we did that school thing was not just because it was available or it was in the middle of a downtown near restaurants and bars and other things, but because it sends the right message to our customers and our staff and all the people we recruit and retain this is a place of learning. This is a place of creativity. This is a place where you come to you think different. So if you're looking for the corporate guys to hire, we're not the corporate guys. We're the creative, crazy guys in the corner that are going to solve your problem. And so creating a culture that's built into the school as an HQ, or that uses school as an HQ, is important. And throughout the teens, we worked on a lot of different projects and a lot of mobile robotics, and we grew and grew. And finally in 2018, Ford came to us, and they had heard about us through some other deals they had done with some bankers. By the way, we had no outside investors, no venture capital, no private equity, no angels. We built it up strictly based on customers, and I could talk all about that. But when Ford came to us, they had heard about us through a friend of a friend, a deal of a deal, and they saw what we were, and they first brought this head engineer over, and he kind of saw our projects, and he saw our culture and what we do. And then he brought over the CTO of Ford, and he saw our culture and what we do. And he brought over a bunch, and we had like 6 or 8 different groups come from Ford. And then they took us out to lunch, and they said, hey, how do you want this to go? I'm like, what do you mean? How do we want this to go? It's like, well, do you want to do work for Ford? Do you want us to acquire you? What do you want to do? And let me tell you, as a small businessman, that is a weird, scary, exciting question to have. And it wasn't something, we didn't go out and market ourselves. We just got that question. They loved what we were culturally, they loved what we were technology-wise, and they loved our can-do attitude, because we did miracles for our customers on peanuts in super short timelines for years and years and years, and we loved it. And that's what Ford wanted and needed. So in 2019, July 1st, in fact, we became a wholly owned subsidiary of Ford Autonomous Vehicles. And so now it's been 4 years. We transitioned from being a defense contractor and doing all this commercial work to doing all sorts of projects for Ford Motor Company groups. So whether it be modeling and simulating autonomous vehicles, developing sensing and perception, building brackets for some project, mounting sensors, working with people on modeling or user interfaces, writing various software, we do it all. And we support all sorts of different entities within Ford. And it's been a very positive experience. So we've had all sorts of great adventures with Ford. We hope to have a lot more. They let me stay on as CEO, which is like, not everyone has great judgment, but we've had a lot of fun. One of our charges, and the reason I put this on the culture slide, is that we were charged not only to do a good job at Ford, but to bring our mojo and our culture. So rubbing off on folks that have been in a large corporation for a long time, showing them what it's like to move fast and move agilely, not saying that we do it better than them, just saying that we do it differently. And if we can do it a little quicker and work together, we can speed up everything that they do there and make it a better place and produce better products. And so it's been a very positive experience. That is all I really had to share, I think, slide-wise, but I am happy to take questions at any time. I don't know what Eric's plan is. There he is.
Well, come on up. Thank you, Mitch. Little did you know, Mitch is also a stand-up comedian. He'll be at the Ann Arbor.
A really bad one.
Okay, so let's dial it back and think to when you're graduating here out of Ann Arbor, and you go for this $1.8 million grant, and you go into that, you're thinking, there's no way, I have no shot at this. You're being told you have no shot at this. You decide to go for it, and then you have that moment. Talk to us about evaluating risk. You made a risk in actually applying for it and going for it, and then you made a risk in actually speaking up and saying, I'm just going to put it all out there. I'm just going to say it all. How is that moment informed how you evaluate risk, and how have others throughout your career?
It's a good question. I'm a pretty conservative guy. And so risk is, I like to take calculated, intelligent risks, whether it be business-wise or technology-wise. And I know I've been criticized at times. Like, people will come to you and you go to these conferences, and they're like, oh, why isn't quantum like, 6,000 people by now? You must be a pretty crappy businessman, and so on. But, there were times at which I should have taken a little bit more risk. But generally, if you take risks at the right time and you look at what the reward is versus the risk and what the consequences are, you can make some really intelligent decisions. And so when we were back in the ATP program days, we had nowhere to go but up. So risk was something that after 2 years of struggling, you had to take more risk or you were just going to die. I mean, our company was going to die because there's only so long you can spend, hand to mouth, making minimum wage sort of stuff and just not getting anywhere. At some point, you know that the thing is not working and you need to shoot it in the head and do something else. But in this case, I took the risk there. It wasn't really that much of a risk. It was only the way to go. But along the way, we had all sorts of inflection points at Quantum where if we had taken a lot of cases we took risk, in other cases we'd taken a little bit more risk, we might have had a lot more reward. And that's the only fault I fault myself for, is times when I should have taken a little bit more risk. But
dive into one of those, if you don't mind. What
Sure.
was one of those moments where you look back and you go, oh, really missed the opportunity?
Absolutely. So the biggest risk, the biggest opportunity miss I ever had in the entire history of the company was back in the late 00s, 2007, 2008. We were funded by the Army to do some monocular vision system to do sign reading of road signs from a moving vehicle. And so we developed some really nice technology around that had road sign reading and had lane departure warning and had headway measurement, all sorts of really, really cool things. And it's very much like the vehicle vision systems that you will see in what they call L3 ADAS kind of systems today, L2, L3 ADAS systems. And so we built this thing from scratch from our own algorithms, and we were far, far ahead of the curve. And I tried to push it in all sorts of tier ones and OEMs, and I went to meeting after meeting like, hey, you should license this from us. You should work with us. And, we would get like, oh, that's very nice. It's super cool, but we don't really see cameras being important in cars at all. And we would get like all these weird rejections. And what I should have done is I should have gone and gotten some investment and built up a team. That was the time to take investment. And even if it was a separate company, spun off a team to pursue that technology, because the competitor to us at the time was an Israeli company called Mobileye. And they were doing effectively very similar technologies that we were, along a very similar algorithmic line, I believe. And they eventually became a multi-billion-dollar business that was acquired by Intel. And the stuff today looks very much like the stuff we were doing 15, 20 years ago, even though it's much more advanced for them now. But
even so, you're talking about in the early days when you otherwise were still growing yet, be at that time when you otherwise look back and think you should have taken the risk. Did you always know you wanted to keep the company's growth and keep the company's size conservative and keep it to a small business?
I know that if you're doing something, and this is like, you probably hear this from restaurateurs too, right? It's like the minute you go to franchise, it's like the quality starts to go out the window. And so we were very concentrated on hiring, being artisanal in our hiring and who we were bringing in and the projects we were taking, in the sense of, we want to work with folks that are very, very good at what they do. And as you guys know, I mean, you guys have been in classes and class projects. Not every person that you work with is fabulous from a technical perspective. And so you want really, really, really good technical people on our team. That was our brand, which was, we were the A team. And they would bring us in like special forces to fix really hard problems in these companies. And so if I start to expand too fast or too large, I'm never going to be able to keep the quality up. And so I definitely wanted to keep the quality up. And so it's also a management issue, by the way. So once you grow going from like 10 people to 20 people is a change. Going from 20 people to 30 people is a change. 30 to 50 is a change. And every time you grow, the management aspects change. All of a sudden, you go from knowing everybody's kid's dog's name to being, oh, I know that guy works here, but I'm not sure of his name, sort of thing. And so you get to a point where you don't intimately know every team member and you don't know where it's at. And so if you grow too large, too fast, you will find quality slips. And we never wanted to do that. But
so growing too large, too fast, when you're hiring in and the company is still small and you're able to maybe meet with every one of the hires, you have some direct perspective of who's coming in. What are you looking for besides the technical chops? What is it that you're looking to ensure that you're bringing into the team, that you're reinforcing in the culture? That's
a super good question. I mean, you're looking for cultural fit. So you're looking for things like, does this person have a can-do attitude? Are they the kind of person that, even if they don't know the information, can go out and find the information? Can they work together as a team to get things done? Because, pardon me, it's great to have lone gunmen that are super smart, but if they're super smart in the corner and they piss everybody off, you're not going to be able to leverage what they're doing. And so you want folks that are good team players, that are really smart and are adaptable and flexible. So, we had times at which you would get like folks that would come in. I wanted to hire this one gentleman from Carnegie Mellon one time, and he was very smart. And I said to him, he said he was a roboticist. He says, well, I want to do robots. I'm like, good, we do robots and other stuff. And he's like, well, I want to do robots. I'm like, well, yeah, but sometimes you might be assigned to other things because you're a super smart PhD dude and we have other things that we might need you on. And normally the kind of people that we're looking for you would say, awesome, that sounds great. Variety is really interesting. I love to apply myself to different problems. This guy's like, yeah, no, I only want to do robots. And so flexibility, from my perspective, is as important as anything, because I can tell you, as part of a small business, very few small businesses are going to have you wearing a single hat that you're only going to do that thing in that way. I can tell you, a CEO, I've worn a million hats. I was HR, I was accounting, I have plunged toilets, I've done it all. And that's what you have to do if you're going to make a small business succeed. And so being a team player, being flexible is really the key thing there.
So you're CEO, you're hiring people on, they're looking to you, and you're setting kind of an example of what the culture is going to be, how the expectations are going to be laid out, and kind of what's expected of people on a day-to-day basis. But that also means what's expected for the work-life balance that they have while they're working for your company. What have you done to make sure that you maintain that throughout the growth of the company? Last week when we talked to the guest about this, she referenced the notion of meditating. That was otherwise kind of a practice that she's taken on to ensure she has that. Have you taken on any practices or any hobbies like that?
I keep a big stocked liquor cabinet in my office that people can come by and check out whenever they like. It's all good. No, our place is a very loose. I mean, when I talk about culture, it's being in an old school. It's a loose place where we have ping pong tables and all that. I hate to make it sound like some sort of .com organic, inorganic horror. Like we are not born out of the Silicon Valley horror. It's we have things where people can go run in our gym. We've got exercise equipment, then go to the park next door. I super don't care whether they're doing sit-ups or whether they're playing an arcade game or whatever. I believe that they are going to get back to their work, and I believe that they are working hard. And so I don't really have to worry too much about like whether people are messing around, because they have expectations of what they're going to deliver. And these are smart people. And so if they can get it together in 3 hours or 8 hours or 12 hours or 15 hours, and they need to take a break and go play an arcade game, that's fine. And so as far as like actually organized work-life balance, I don't, I used to set a bad example, I would say, before we got acquired a long time ago. I would work days and nights and weekends, and that was just how it was for me, because that's what I liked and that's where it was for me. But I never killed everyone and said, hey, you need to be here this weekend. They were motivated at times to do what they had to do to get the job done. Everyone knows when the milestone is. Everybody knows when it's got to be delivered, and it's got to be delivered with quality. And so if they end up staying up late that night to work on it, okay. I mean, we hope that we are staffed appropriately in the future so we don't have to do this again. It is a failure of management if you have people working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day to try to crunch time it up to get to that point. Because at some, you can have those, but at some point that means you're understaffed or you're putting too much work or it's not well thought out or planned. And so, I've heard this thing of people working, ungodly hours, 80 hours, 90 hours, 100 hours a week for years on end. That's not a thing. Maybe if you're the owner or the entrepreneur, it may be a thing, but certainly not for the staff. So, yeah.
Want to kick it out. Surprisingly,
Sure.
They're not going to expect this, but Anna, are you here? Anna Ho? You're here? Okay. Shout out your question that you posed in the forum yesterday. Absolutely. Shout it out. You got it.
My question is about what your secrets are to motivating people. Because I know Eric Bay was kind of like one of your articles, and you talk about like a mad scientist lab, engineering, and you quoted like to motivate undergraduates to get up early in the morning to sell data with coffee. How to motivate anyone? So I'm just like interested how to kind of like get people to buy into that culture.
That's a great question. I mean, it's if you are pure and you believe in your vision and it's a good vision, it isn't that, and you've got the right people, isn't that hard to motivate, because they see where it's at, they see what you're into, they see how you're dedicated to it, and they want to contribute and be a part of that vision. And I think inherently people want to be part of a team and they want to do great things and achieve. And so, I could go off on all sorts of philosophy about it and say all sorts of, fun things about, I do this, I do that. But like in the case of the IEEE and the bagel stand back when I was a student here, long before the DB Cafe, whatever it is, I, trying to get the students together, we had no money at IEEE. We were like the underdog. Like HKN had it totally together. And IEEE was like the sad, pathetic, like, it was kind of like the crew of goofballs. And so I was elected the head of the crew of goofballs. And we got together, we said, hey, we need to really build something awesome here. And I don't mean to make it sound like the Bad News Bears, but like, everybody saw that like, hey, people didn't have great expectations of IEEE, so let's build something better and greater. And I think sometimes when you're part of a small company, in some sense, the only way you have to go is up. And so you've got a little something to prove. And if you hire the right people, they're excited about trying to prove something and trying to do something great. If you have that much problem motivating someone, then probably there isn't a good fit between that person and the organization. At least that's my opinion.
Well, let's talk about that. So when there isn't a good fit, not all employees, want to be there, stay there, or sometimes it's a bad hire. What are the lessons learned for students who are going to end up becoming founders or becoming in charge of other teams? Now that you've dealt with employees who otherwise maybe shouldn't be there, you need to get rid of, what do you pass on to them? What do they need to know and how to handle that?
I often, if something like that happens, I don't blame the staffer. I blame myself because, or myself and the hiring team, because I feel like we should have done a better job filtering, and we should have done a better job finding that match. And so and in fact, my CTO, who's not here today, and he would tell you the same thing, is all the times that we thought that it was very threshold, like borderline, whether we should, hire this person or not, we were kind of very much on the fence, and we went with hire them and see how it works out. Those times never work out because it just turns out that, our suspicions were correct. It's not a good match. And so, when it's not a good match, the thing isn't, you'll see these folks on TV and stuff. It's like you're fired, anyone you ever meet that likes to fire people is not a person you want to be around, because firing people is a terrible, horrible experience. And, these are real live human beings that have dreams and hopes and are smart and are motivated, and it just may not be working out. And so having to let them go is a crappy experience. But if you do it in the right way and you work things out, you can make it better. And so we've had folks where it wasn't working out, or we had a transition period where we said, look, I think we both agree it's not working out. Here's like a month and a half, the next 2 months. We'll kind of lighten your workload. Why don't you go out and try to find another job? And so you can transition off this without being terminated today and then have to struggle to get unemployment and all these other things. And so you can transition people out gradually and do it in a humane way that I think is really a good way to do it. At least you can do that in a small company. And I've had I'm going to say luxury, because it's not a luxury. It's when you plan enough and you have enough cash reserve and these things are going to happen, you can do this sort of thing. Mm. Now, if you've got to lay off half your staff because you've run out of money, then it's a whole separate ball of wax. But doing it the right way and doing it the humane way is the way you maintain respect from your staff and the way you part on a positive basis. And so I have people that have left the company that call me up and want to go out for beer and things like that. It's weird to have someone call you up and want to go out for beer. It shows you've done the right thing. They want to go out for beer with you even though you let them go. And so it's I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, no. So that empathy that you've kind of revolved the company's culture around and kind of made sure is anchored is something that, of course, you're talking about Ford wanted to bring in, wanted to kind of have the mojo and the culture brought in over there. Talk to us about the nature of what that was like to try to bring your team around to knowing they're now going to be acquired by this huge corporation.
One of the scarier moments of my career, we started talking to Ford in 2018. And the due diligence lasted 9 or 10 months. So if you guys see these things,
you mean it was not overnight?
It's yeah, exactly, right? It's you see these things where it's someone a big company likes you and they're going to buy you, and it's going to be 2 days later they're going to buy you. That doesn't happen, at least. And you don't want to be acquired that way because they haven't done due diligence, and that's a bad scene. But Ford took about 9-10 months, almost a year, to due diligence on us. And I remember as the deal was moving forward, I had to walk that line of whether we accepted new contracts or not new contracts. And that was getting a little bit weaselly because if the deal didn't go through, what are we going to do? But I remember the day before the deal closed or the week before, I kept thinking, how are we going to explain this to this team? The team has come to work at a small company, not a big company. That's why they're here. And how do you tell them now we're going to be part of this giant behemoth and that things aren't going to change? And so I worked on a talk. And I got up the day that we were acquired, which was Monday, July 1st, 2019. That morning we got up, I went to a room, we signed all the paperwork with the Ford folks, and I got up in the gym for an all hands meeting because we've got at school, right? So there's a gym. So everyone sits on the bleachers, and I got in the gym and some of the Ford guys were there and my CTO was there with me, and I got up and I basically announced it. And I said, look guys, there comes a time in every company's life when it has to grow up and see where we're at. And, there's things change. The only thing constant is change, right, everybody? And so, this is a positive thing. We are going to now do the same technologies and work that we do now in a slightly different way for a slightly different application, but now for a company that has worldwide global reach. And so our technologies that we're developing can get out there to the marketplace and make a difference more than when we were little Quantum Signal. And by the way, you're all getting raises and better benefits. And no laugh for that? Wow, it's a tough crowd. You guys are rough. So everybody was really excited. I was really scared what people were going to say. And actually for the 3 days after that, or the 2 days later, we had to march every person in and say, hey, we're going to transition you over. Here's what your new job is. Here's what your new title and pay is and things like that. And every single person, 100% of the people accepted the deal. And so they were very excited to be there. In fact, I wandered in to one of our coworkers and I asked her, I said, all right, so you were in that meeting? She's like, yeah. I'm like, so what'd you think? She's like, I wanted to cheer, but I didn't want to kind of look goofy when I did it. So she was so excited. And so it was a great day for everybody. But again, it's very scary to have to, because you didn't know everyone's going to quit, or everyone's going to stay. But fortunately, everyone saw the vision, and it was only an upgrade and a great thing for everybody involved. So
that's awesome. Another student question I want to call out here. Ben Kahn, are you out there? Ben? Okay. Ben, you're not here. Anyways, Ben had a great question. His question was, for students who otherwise have an entrepreneurial spirit, who have that drive, who have that interest in kind of becoming their own boss and being a founder, and they want to build, but they don't have an idea yet, what do you suggest they do?
I mean, you saw my slide. It's like, that was our problem too. Like, are we going to have a product? Are we going to have a service? What are we going to do? Consulting, in retrospect, it was a great idea, but it feels like a cop out at some level, because it's like, oh, we're going to apply our skills everywhere and anywhere. It's going to be great. You really do have to have some sort of idea, but I think that people work too hard. When you focus on it too hard, then you're going to come up empty, right? It's like there's a writer's block that goes with it. I think that if you're looking for an idea, you should look around in the world for where there are pain points that you could solve. Just like when we started to transition to, let's talk to more customers and see what they need. And some of the biggest companies and the biggest successes come out of the founders found a niche that was something where nobody was servicing this niche, or the niche was being serviced very poorly, and there's a real need there. And so if you can come up with a solution for that real need or pursue that, you have at least some potential to fill a market. I'm always very hesitant when I talk to people, and I get a lot of people coming to me with their company ideas where it's a technology looking for a problem. It's a team that doesn't have an idea who their customer is going to be. By the way, you don't need investors, guys. You need customers. Customers is what you need, because this is the investors are going to ask you the same thing. Like, who's going to be your customers? If you can go and validate your idea with real customers, everything else will come out great. We grew Quantum on strictly, moxie and hustle and customers, and that turned out fine.
The money will follow.
The money will follow, and if you want investment later because you need it to scale, the investors will say, wow, these guys have a half dozen customers already, and it's proven the technology, and I want to go with it. It's like, but if you're just like, this is an idea and we have no validation, and literally there are companies out there, guys, I am not BSing you, that have burnt through piles of cash to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars that have not sold a single product or had a single customer. And how do you think it goes when they go for round C or D and they go back to their investors and they say, hey, we need more money? They say, there's no customers here. There's no validation of the business plan at all. It's like, it doesn't go well. And in fact, a lot of the investments wising up. That's why you've got all this dry powder in the VC market right now, like money that is not invested, because they are getting wiser to investing in these various things. And they want to make sure that there is actually a real company there with a real future. So I don't know if that answers the question. But
absolutely. Yeah. Alicia Polak, you here? Awesome. Got a question? A question you submitted yesterday?
Is it the one about the acquisitions?
Yeah.
Okay. My question essentially was, as the founder or starter of a company, when do you know, I think you already mentioned this, but when do you know when it's time to grow up and let go of some of that control and either acquire or be acquired?
Well, first of all, as me as a human being, I don't think I'm ever going to grow up. So, and I think my wife could definitely support that notion, or at least acknowledge it. From a company perspective, you need to look at whether you're growing or you're achieving or you're treading water and things like that. And when Ford came to us, we had products that were growing and a customer base that was growing, and we had a very bright future, but there was also uncertainty. And we had been through, the downturn in 2008. We had been through government sequestration in 2013. We knew that there are cycles that are going to come and go, and it's hard. And I can tell you as a founder, as the biz dev guy who was responsible for keeping the pipeline of work filled for a consulting and engineering services company, every night at 3 a.m., I would wake up for 20 years thinking about, hey, are we going to have enough work to support people going forward in the next 6 months from now? Hey, am I going to have to lay people off? Because I never, ever wanted to lay people off. That it was like the worst possible thing could happen for me because I feel a responsibility as founder to everybody that's in the company. They have families and they have lives, and it is my responsibility to make sure that this is a stable, great job. That's what they are here for. And so when the time came, it just felt like an organic time after 20 years where we had proven all sorts of things with all sorts of customers and done wonderful stuff, but it wasn't growing at some sort of super duper crazy rate. And it was just going to be more treadmill, theoretically with some growth for another 10, 20, 30 years. And I thought it was fun to try something different, but really the biggest decision point there was, am I doing right by my team? And, I didn't have investors to answer to. I am the investor. I had my team to answer to. And if we get acquired, is it going to be good for them or bad for them? Is it good or bad for their families? And so from my perspective, this was a good deal for all of our team. This was a good deal for their families. And this was a good deal for the organization. And yeah, it was fine for me too. It was good. But yeah, so.
So students, raise your hand if you're a senior. Okay. So the students who are seniors and for those who are otherwise thinking about what they want to do in a year, 2 years, 3 years when they graduate, I'm sure all of them would love to work for somebody who's thinking about them, their families, their interests, their needs, who's taking that responsibility on and has a cultural anchor and empathy the way that you have. How do they find a company like Quantum Signal? How do they otherwise come to work there as opposed to Amazon or Microsoft or where else?
It's a good question. You have to look beyond the surface, right? You have to look beyond, the guys that will set up booths that have really great swag and awesome polished HR people and all this kind of stuff, recruiters, they're fantastic and they'll probably get you the highest paying job that you can find there. Amazon will give you the biggest paycheck and they have the slickest booth and all these things. When you look at some of these quirky little companies, those are the ones that you want to dig into and look closer at, or mid-market companies, because those are the ones where they probably still have, the founders involved. They probably still have some connection to some of the early days and things like that. And you can figure it out pretty quickly when you start asking around and you start talking to people there. Just like for those, if any of your graduate students, when you look for an advisor, you go talk to the other graduate students working for that advisor and you see what they think. And if they all look sad and beaten down and they can't say positive things, that is not an advisor you want to work for. It's like similarly in a company, if you go and you meet the people in the room and you seem like, wow, they're smart, they're quirky, they seem fun, they seem happy, then maybe that's a place you want to be. And I tell this story, and I probably shouldn't, but I will because we're all friends, right? Yeah, it's like we're friends here. I've had friends that have gone and worked at places like Apple, and they come back to me with similar stories. And particularly, I hate to pick on Apple, but this is a true story. It's like every single one I've ever asked that has gone to Apple and then left Apple has given me the same comment. I say, so did you like working there? It seems like such a cool company. And they're like, I learned a lot. You're like, well, I learned a lot is not that I liked working there. That's not the same thing. And they're like, I learned a lot. And I'm like, okay. So, and similarly, Amazon, I don't know if you guys knew this, the turnover at Amazon is significant. So when you look at these big companies, they're very sexy, but you need to be careful where you're going to go and who you're going to work with and stuff. We have some pretty positive experience at Ford. We work with some really great people. We have some awesome, outstanding engineering teams. We love working with these guys. So, I can recommend certain big companies, and I can recommend, it depends on who you're working with in these places. But definitely if you're looking for something unique and caring and very artisanal, you need to look beyond the surface and look for unique, caring, artisanal, companies, smaller companies and things. But I don't know.
Perfect. Yeah. All right, students, if you got a question or two, throw a hand up. We've got some mics that'll run out there to you, and we can dig a little bit deeper.
Hi, my name is Chetan. I really liked your aspect from culture. I was really curious about how you went about vetting people. I don't want to get too much secret sauce of the question specifically, but how you found people that came to attitudes and how you knew within probably 5 minutes they were the other person you wanted to work with.
Sure. So there's two aspects to the vetting people. One is, there's a couple different aspects, but one is the technical, right? So we put people through things like technical tests, take-home tests, work days. We have them come into the office and they do a work day with their coworkers, see how they work as a team, how they think about problems, and they get paired up with people that work at our organization. They're the technical tests. And then there's from my perspective, I call it the "Are you a human?" test, and it's kind of the test that goes along with when you go out to lunch with these folks and how they talk about things and what it's about. And I'll tell a story of like one where, and I haven't done a lot of the interviews in the last couple of years because I'm busy and I've got a whole team that works on that stuff. But I could tell you a story where we hired in a guy, this was years ago, and I hadn't been on the interviews. And at the first lunch that we went, on his first day, we went out to lunch, and I was talking to the guy and I was trying to throw him soft soap questions and things. And at some point he basically came forward and he said, well, you guys, I really want to work at this other place, but they turned me down. So you guys were my second choice. And he's saying that to the CEO right across on his first day at lunch. I'm like, oh, he's not. This is a career limiting move, isn't it? So if I feel like if I had been on the vetting on that, we might have gotten a little bit further and dug that out of him beforehand. But we try to get to that point where we want folks that want to work with us. We want folks that are enthusiastic about working in our place. We don't want to be second choice. We don't want to be third choice. We want to be their dream. And we have passed on people that were super technical that seemed very, very great on the technical side that just culturally weren't going to fit or just didn't seem to care about us. You come in and we ask, do you have any questions? There are people that ask us all sorts of questions about our company and good questions. Some are goofy, but most are really good. And then there's other people that have no questions at all. Please don't go to a company with an interview and not have done any looking around on what the company does or who they are.
If you're not interested enough to ask a question, do you really want to work there?
Right. I mean, exactly. So I don't know. Does that answer your question? I had a hard time following that, but we read between the lines. And so, what you betray and the things that you say and how you act during the interview or how you're in the interaction. And our interview process is not quick, folks. We are not going to interview you and offer you that in like 2 hours. It's we meet you online. There's like I said, there's a take-home test. There's some phone interviews. You come in and stuff like that. And we do that because it's not just for us, it's for you. Because we want there to be a good match, right? Like I said, I hate firing people. That's a horrible thing to let people go. I don't want people wasting time in a place they don't want to be at. And so we try to make sure there's a really good match there. And generally, we're really, really good at it. And we have some people at our place that have been around since basically day one. Day one when we got the NIST grant, effectively. Actually, even before that. So, yeah.
Okay. Amazing advice for your early stage careers. Thank you, folks. That's class.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.